Not a problem at all. We appreciate it. A little bit about yourself. You've been the commissioner of the West Australian Electoral Commission for a few years now. How do you get a job like this?
I just applied.
Right.
I was a public servant before this, and I've always had an interest in electoral matters. So when the opportunity came up, it was a great opportunity for me, and I was lucky enough to be successful. So I joined the organisation just as the COVID madness was starting. So I had an interesting introduction to electoral things, and we ran the 2021 state election right through the middle of the COVID period. So.
Right, that must have been very interesting times. What sort of things do you have to accommodate for doing a election during COVID times, a world pandemic?
Yeah, so obviously we worked very closely with the health department took their advice on the best approach that we were going to implement. We had to look very early on about whether should we find ourselves in a lockdown situation, whether we might have to postpone the election or postpone voting.
Right.
Fortunately, that didn't arise, but we had to do all that sort of legal work beforehand to work out whether that was possible.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when we knew that we were okay to go forward, then it was crazy things. I spent money buying, things like bottles of hand sanitizer. We employed more people to wipe down benches and voting booths and things as people were voting. I had to buy 1.6 million tiny little pencils so that every elector in the state...
for every person.
Yep, because you couldn't share pencils.
Of course.
So we had all these pencils.
You used to have the old pencils on the string. Everybody used the same pencil.
That's right, yeah. So we had to encourage people to come in and either bring their own pen or pencil or use our disposable pencil. I know a lot of people were concerned about what happened to those pencils afterwards because it did seem like a waste, but we recycled as many of them and gave them away to schools and that sort of thing once they'd been cleaned and sanitised.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting experience, and as my first state election, it was quite an interesting
one. And it all ran fairly smoothly, and people were happy to sort of take their time and be patient for the whole process?
Yeah, look, one of the key messages we pushed there was early voting and don't all rush in on the Saturday and clog up the polling places and be standing right in long queues and that sort of thing. People really loved that. The really interesting thing when we did some surveys afterwards, and even just anecdotal stories when I was at polling places talking to people, was that we did that primarily because of the COVID thing. But when you talk to people, they were like, oh, this is great. This is so convenient. We like this early voting. We like not having to, rush on a Saturday to get to the primary school and vote.
Yeah, of course, do it in their own time.
Yep. So, I would bump into mums on the way home from school, picking up the kids and that sort of thing, saying, this is great. People on their way to work being able to get there at sort of 4:30 on a weekday and cast their vote. So
I've noticed that a bit with the recent Rockingham by-election, which is sort of why we're here to talk. A lot of people getting down to the one near the Rockingham foreshore on Commodore Drive. I've seen that open most days.
Yep.
And people making the most of it. Are you getting a few people going through and sort of changing the sort of old school system and everybody being there on Saturday?
We are, yeah. We're seeing this across Australia and New Zealand when I talk to my counterparts in the other jurisdictions, that this concept of an election day is kind of changing into an election period, because more people want to vote early. They don't all want to wait until the last minute. Whether they've made up their mind already or they just like the convenience, they want to be able to get in there as early as possible and do it. And look, Rockingham in 2021 at the state election was incredibly popular with early voting. It was one of the busiest that we had in the state. Right. And that trend seems to be continuing with the Rockingham by-election. So far we've had, as of yesterday, over 7,000 people come through that early voting centre out of the 30,000 people who can vote in the Rockingham by-election, and almost another 3,000 have chosen to vote by post as well. So almost a third of people in Rockingham have already voted, which is great for us. We don't have to worry about them. We don't have to harass them about don't forget to vote, and they've done the right thing and got in early.
What happens with those votes that you collect? Like you're saying, over 7,000 of them and stuff. Are you allowed to start counting them yet, or do they just sit there in storage waiting for the day? Or?
Yep. No, we're not allowed to to count any votes until 6 p.m. on Saturday night.
Not even a little
polling
peek,
finishes.
just to get a little hint, or
no advance peeking or anything. What we do as of 8:30 this morning is we start opening those postal votes that have been returned.
Yep.
We check the people off the electoral roll. We open their envelopes and place the ballots into ballot boxes. In some cases, we batch them into batches of 50 so that they're ready to be counted. But no one looks at the ballots when they're opened.
Yeah.
They simply look at them. They simply collect them together and get them ready to count. So there's no looking at how the ballot paper's been marked until Saturday night at 6 p.m.
Right. And how is the final count done? Is it by human, by computer, by highly trained chipmunks, or what's the process there?
No, it's done by a very big and dedicated force of almost volunteers. They're paid for their work, but they don't work for us on a regular basis. So every election we hire an enormous number of people who are just members of the community with an interest in elections and who want to work. And they are counted by hand. So there will be tables, much like you've got in the studio here, 4 or 5 tables joined into one big table. There'll be about 10 or 12 people standing around that, and they'll simply be walking along putting ballot papers into piles for the candidates, and then they will sit down and count those, and then they'll go through that distribution of preferences I was talking about before.
And then do they sort of get recounted and stuff like that? Like one person counts them, hands them off, puts them in a bundle, and that sort of...
Usually what happens is, someone will do an initial count and stick them in a pile of 50. And then someone will do what's called a flick check, where they just go through very fast, check that if it's candidate A, then all the votes in that particular bundle for candidate A are marked 1 if we're doing the first preference count. So they just go through very quickly, just double checking that. And then ultimately, if it's required, and if the returning officer, who's the person that I employ to run the election for us, if they decide that a recount's necessary, all those ballot papers will be recounted again right from the start.
Right. And what does it take to sort of trigger a recount? Is there like a sort of closeness that it needs to be, like within 0.5%?
Yeah, look, we don't usually work on a specific figure, but probably anywhere kind of 100 votes or less, we usually expect people to ask us to recount.
Of course, yeah.
In some cases, it very much relies on the returning officer and how comfortable they are about their team and the count that they've done. In some cases, they will have done a second count already as part of their process, and so if they're really confident that the number that they've arrived at is safe, then they will say, you haven't given me any evidence for why I should do a recount other than the fact that it might be close. But generally, as a rule, if it's getting really close, down into the tens of votes, we'll say to the returning officer, let's do a recount just to be absolutely sure. And in some cases, I can't think of any in this particular in WA, but in other jurisdictions, in some cases, they've done a recount and the result has flipped.
Has differed. Wow.
But the majority of times it's a confirmation of what it was before the recount was done. Might have been a slight change.
Is it a regular thing? Like you sort of know with every election there's going to be someone demanding that there's corruption and they demand a recount and stuff? And
No, I mean the 2021 election, given its nature, it was a very big win for the government at the time. A lot of the seats were won by very big margins, and a lot were won on what we call the first preference vote. So they got 50% plus 1 just on the number ones that people marked on their ballot.
Right.
And so the other candidates often look at those numbers and go, there's not much point, we know
they've got it.
Yeah, they've got it.
Sort of thing. And what is the sort of magic number for the seat of Rockingham this Saturday? The sort of 50% plus 1.
I haven't got my my calculator with me.
How many people are eligible to vote?
So there's 30,213. So if you divide that by
15,108
plus 1, but the trick there is it's the number of votes cast, not the number of people who can vote, because obviously not everybody votes.
Oh, right.
And
so
some people
that's the amount of people that are potentially eligible to vote.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. But you normally the state election, we had 85%, I think, of the state actually voted. So 15% chose not to vote.
Yeah.
Because it is compulsory to vote, so they chose to.
So if anybody hits that number on Saturday night, you'll be able to announce a winner. That's sort of 15,000. You know that candidate definitely sort of has the win in the bag, and you will announce them as the winner. Or
if we get those 30,000 people all turning out, which I'd love to happen, and I'd encourage everyone listening who's thinking about voting or not
everybody
voting.
Should get involved in politics. I think it's interesting that you can ask almost anybody their opinion on, say, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Everybody's got an opinion.
Yep.
You ask them about local politics, a lot of people don't even know who the local candidates are, and I believe it's sort of politics that has more of a direct impact on their lives. It's their local council, their local town, and stuff like that. So I definitely believe more people should get out there and get involved. But on Saturday, will there be a sort of live tally that you release to the media, and we'll be able to sort of watch the numbers go up?
So people can see on our website, elections.wa.gov.au, you can tune in virtually from 6 o'clock. We probably won't start posting results until maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock, when we've got some results in from the polling places down in Rockingham.
Yeah.
And we will be updating that as the figures come through. So.
And what's the sort of logistics involved in putting together a by-election and having enough people to count potentially 30,000 odd votes?
Yeah, so it's quite a job. As we were discussing, when it comes out of the blue by-elections, you're not prepared for them. You know, we did one recently in September last year, so we kind of knew what to expect, but you never quite know where they're going to pop up. And this one in particular was quite a shock, I think, to everyone. So we had to very quickly reorganise ourselves, and probably the biggest challenge was finding places to use as polling places. On the Saturday, we generally use schools and community facilities because they're closed normally and no one needs them. Although in this particular case, there was one school that had an event running on the Friday night, and they were worried about whether we'd be able to sort of get our stuff in while they were moving out and those sorts of things. The biggest challenge probably is finding an early voting centre, because obviously they open during the week.
Yeah.
So you can't use schools.
That's something you need for a lot longer period of time.
A lot of community facilities like council rec centres and that sort of thing are busy anyway. People are using them for sporting and other community events, so we can't use those. So we end up looking for commercial premises that are vacant and where the landlord's happy to rent to us for sort of 4 to 6 week period, which, you know, can be quite a struggle at times, because understandably landlords are looking for a longer term tenant. They don't necessarily just want to someone who's going to be in there for a short period. But we were lucky enough to find one on Commodore Drive there, which sort of ticked all the boxes for us. It's quite big, which allows us to get the numbers through without any major hassles and any queuing. So, and then you've got to go and find staff. So we needed to find staff pretty quickly.
What's the sort of vetting process involved in finding the staff? Because I believe, obviously, working at the Electoral Commission, that you would have to appear to be impartial. I know, obviously, you people, that sounds a little interesting. But sorry, I don't mean to sound like that. Yeah. But you obviously vote as well. You have a vote, so you do need to have a preference, but you don't want to be seen to be leaning any one way or the other when it comes to your political preference. So how do you sort of remain impartial?
Yeah, impartiality is a key part of our role, and running any election, whether it's a by-election, a state election or local government elections, we have to stay out of the particular politics that are involved. As you say, that doesn't mean that our staff miss out on a vote. We're all allowed to vote, and we're all allowed to hold our personal political views. But what we do require of all staff is that they sign a disclosure when they start work with us to say that they're not a member of a political party or that they're not involved in political activities that might impact on their work.
You're not going to see any picket signs on their front lawn of any candidates they support?
We'd prefer not to, no. Yeah. Look, in some cases with the state election, sometimes people slip through or they don't think about it. They forget that their distant cousin is running, in another seat or something. Those sort of situations, we just assess that on a case-by-case basis. If they're working totally unrelated way, they're not active in any way in supporting their relative who's a candidate or something, then then we may allow them to continue to work. But most of the people we get are regulars. In fact, we have come state election time, and even this time with the state election, with the by-election, we have someone who came from Adelaide to work here.
Really?
And apparently goes pretty much all over Australia doing election work. We know that there's a lot of grey nomads, if I can use that term, the retirees who caravan around the country, and they tend to follow the state elections around the country because they know it's guaranteed work.
Oh, wow.
And they can pick up that sort of temporary work for whether it's in an early voting centre or on polling day, or working with us at head office doing the vote counting. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very popular with some people. And a lot of people, as you said earlier, don't necessarily have an interest in the politics of it, but they love an election. It's almost like they love a result, and they love the process.
Good, healthy bit of competition.
Exactly, they love the process of how you get to that result, and so they like being involved in it, and it's really great. And even without asking, we just seem to attract the right sort of people. They're not the political people. They're not interested in politics or promoting one case or the other. They're just interested in democracy, getting involved, and they like helping to deliver that result.
Yeah, of course. I think democracy and debate and sort of two parties arguing for what's best is a key foundation of any good democracy. So it's nice that it's strong and healthy and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a competition and people are invested heavily in the outcomes, and sometimes people will turn to nefarious means to maybe influence that outcome. How do you prevent things like corruption and bribery and things like that? Is that ever a factor?
No, it's certainly not in my time, and I don't remember any cases in recent memory of what you would probably describe as bribery or corruption involving election officials.
Yeah.
I think people have a healthy respect for democracy in WA and in Australia, and so that sort of thing doesn't necessarily happen at election time. Obviously, there are laws in place that prevent that sort of thing, and we're very vigilant about it. If people are suspicious of any sort of thing like that, they will often make a complaint to us and we'll investigate it.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, in fact 10 times out of 10 in recent history, we've investigated some allegations of not bribery and corruption, but allegations of some what I suppose people might call dodgy things going on, and
vote tampering or something like that.
Yeah, and most times, there's been little
behind
little evidence. It's usually, particularly in local government elections, it's usually one candidate who doesn't like another candidate and throwing a bit of mud and hoping
a little bit of a personal grudge sort of situation.
Exactly. We had some cases, or one particular case at local government elections in 2021, which wasn't necessarily anything to do with us, but some people were caught stealing ballot papers out of people's letterboxes, so postal votes out of people's ballot boxes. So that election had to be rerun. So, that was an unfortunate situation, but again, not something that we can particularly control. In that particular case, it seems it was just some people who it wasn't even clear in the end whether they intended to do anything with those ballot papers.
How would that work? Would they sort of fill out the postal vote and submit it?
So basically,
how do they
pretending to be someone else
identify that vote though?
In terms of, what do you mean identify?
In terms of how does somebody get sent out a voting form?
So in local government elections, most councils conduct them as a postal vote. So everyone automatically gets a postal vote. Whether you've asked for one or not.
Yeah.
So what they were doing was going through and picking up. I think they had about 40 or so votes when they were arrested by the police. So
right. Wow. Interesting.
An unfortunate circumstance, but a very rare one. We very rarely hear reports of that sort of thing.
Yeah, right. And you get involved in sort of local government elections, and so this is for councillors and mayors now. I've heard that recently they've changed it so the people will actually be voting for a mayor of their city or town. Yeah,
that's right. The law has just changed as of the 1st of July, where a certain size local governments, instead of councillors electing the mayor, it's what's called a direct election for mayor. So the people in a particular case, the people of the city of Rockingham can vote directly for the mayor and as well as the councillors that they would have normally voted for.
Right.
So,
and so this will be running this October?
That's right.
Right.
So we were working on getting ready for the local government elections when the Rockingham by-election popped up. That kind of parts of that have had to go on hold, and there are some people in my team continuing to work on that, and others who had to switch on to Rockingham. But 21st of October this year is the local government elections.
And that's for all local governments in WA?
All local governments across the state. And it's not compulsory to vote, but obviously, again, as we said earlier, it's a fantastic opportunity, and I don't think people should miss out on the chance to have a say on who's going to run their local area.
One of the most effective ways and sort of simplest ways to have a direct effect on sort of where your local community is going. So I definitely encourage people to get involved.
Yeah.
And what's that like when you're sort of running so many sort of small elections over such a large area compared to running a by-election that nobody was ready for a couple of months ago?
No, again, it's quite a challenge. So I think at this point we're doing 123 councils across WA.
Yeah.
And some of those will have a couple of hundred electors in their local government. Others will have several 100,000. So you've got to be prepared for, I guess, both ends of that spectrum. Some of those councils won't even go to an election. In other words, they'll have, say, 2 vacancies and they'll only get 2 people nominating to fill those vacancies, in which case those 2 people are elected without anyone having to cast a vote.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. In some of the smaller regional councils, they just, either the population base is not big enough or people are not interested enough, and so they just get 2 people putting their hands up, and so if there are 2 vacancies, those people get automatically elected, and so that's all done. So from our point of view, those ones are the easy elections.
They're the easiest ones, but no counting involved.
They're a very small minority. That doesn't happen a lot. And so most of them will go through to a full election. And as I said, most of them are done via post.
Yeah.
So ballot papers get sent out to everyone, and then they come back to us, and we count them as you would in a normal election.
Yeah, right. And I've heard like media blackouts coming up to an election a couple of days before. What sort of levels are that on? Because obviously there's federal. Do you guys have anything to do with federal elections?
No. So federal elections are run by the Australian Electoral Commission. It's a point of confusion for a lot of people because...
so it's a completely separate team.
Yep.
And they send a team over to WA to collect all our votes here take them back to Canberra.
They have a team that's permanently based here in WA. They have one in every state and territory.
Wow.
And so we work very closely with them and we share resources where we can.
So you just cooperate? There's no like sort of, you see in the movies with police, like you're out of your jurisdiction. Nothing like that?
No, not at all. The AEC are helping us out with the by-election on Saturday, providing us with some equipment that we needed. We'll do the same with them when it comes time for federal election or for the referendum that they're running as well. So they'll be running the voice referendum when it's announced.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. A lot of elections and referendums and stuff coming up.
Yes.
But so the media blackout, I know it definitely happens on a sort of federal level and a state level and stuff like that. And local level, do we have a media blackout the days leading up to it?
It's not something that we get involved in. It's an organisation called the Australian Communications and Marketing Authority or something, ACMA, ACMA, and they impose that blackout. And it's usually just, my understanding, television and at a federal level, television and radio. But for the state, there's not the similar sort of restrictions in place.
Yeah, cool. And do you follow much politics? Like when you get home from working at the Electoral Commission all day, do you turn on the news and listen to, or is it?
Some days I don't. Some days I don't feel like it. No.
Right.
But yeah, look, you have to stay across what's happening, and if you can see a situation developing that might result in a by-election, something like that, then you have to stay I
was sort of wondering if
sort of thing,
working from your position, if you get sort of an ability to sort of predict where politics is going to go, and like you said, if a by-election might kick off.
No, we can make educated guesses, but we're making no more educated guess than you or anyone else would be.
Even with the outcomes of elections and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, no, as a rule, we never try and predict the outcome of election. As I said to you before we started, we're not interested in the outcome of the election really in terms of who wins. Our main aim is to get as many people out there and voting as possible, you know.
Yeah, of course. More invested in the function of democracy.
That's right. Yeah.
Instead of influencing the outcome.
Yeah. No, you know, you can mark your ballot paper however you want. We don't particularly care. As long as you turn up and mark it, that's what we're really interested in.
No, cool. And when can people expect to have a result to the by-election if everything runs sort of smoothly?
Yeah, look, I would expect, and it's somewhat out of our control, we start publishing results on the web from sort of 6:37 on Saturday night. Some media commentators may make a call and say, look, it's clear that so-and-so is going to win by that stage. We never make that call until the final votes are all counted, which won't actually be until the following Friday. So under the legislation, if you cast a postal vote, you have until 6 p.m. on Saturday night to make sure that postal vote gets into a post box. Yeah. And then Australia Post have got until Thursday after the election to get that back to us. So we can't actually declare any final result and any winner.
You've got to give Australia Post a bit of time to get it to you, and you've counted
all those
every
votes
vote.
Are in.
So even if you've got you're beyond sort of 50% plus one, say you're at 60-70%, will the Electoral Commission declare a winner then? Or?
No, we won't. We
Not
wait
until every vote is officially counted.
Yep.
But obviously you're showing the numbers on your website, so the media outlets.
So the media and the community will come to its own conclusion that, you know, the person's got 60 or 70% of the vote. They're obviously going to win. Yeah. But we're not able to declare a result until all those votes are in and until we're absolutely comfortable that they've all been counted properly and there've been no mistakes made and that sort of thing. So.
And have you noticed sort of the popularity of politics increasing or declining, or?
Well, from the literature that I read and from the feedback I get, and this is a global thing, not just Australia, all of that suggests that people are increasingly not interested in politics and elections, which is...
How do we change that?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people sort of gauge their participation against the behaviour of politicians. So they see the behaviour of politicians and think, why should I bother voting for them? But of course, that in my mind personally, and it's just my personal view, it kind of reinforces that behaviour, because if you don't get involved, potentially they'll just keep getting away with things, you know, as much as they think they can.
Exactly. Yeah. So
the onus really is on all of us to get involved and have your say. You know, please don't sort of give in to lethargy, if you like, and say, oh no, I can't be bothered. You know, you may think your vote doesn't count, but every single one counts.
That's where the power lies.
And that's right. It's your opportunity once every 4 years, or when you get a by-election, it's your opportunity to now choose a new representative for Rockingham in the Legislative Assembly, in the Parliament. So, you know, don't miss that opportunity, because otherwise you're going to have to wait until March 2025 to have that say again.
Yeah, there's no point sitting around complaining about it after the fact, saying that you're not happy about the person that got put in. Get out there, be a part of it, and make your vote count, I suppose.
Very much so. Very much so.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure having you, Robert. I've learnt a lot here, and I hope that a lot of people have learnt how important it is that they get their vote out there as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, look, thanks for having us in, Kitt, and it's really important. I'm really happy to be on community radio. It's hard in a by-election to get the message out to people. A lot of the bigger media outlets aren't particularly interested in carrying the story, so we're very happy to make contact with you guys and remind people. And if I can do a quick plug for those that are listening and haven't voted yet, you've got until Saturday night at 6 p.m. to cast your vote. If you want to do it now, you get down to our early voting centre on Commodore Drive in Rockingham. As I said, it's open 8 till 6 every day. This Thursday it'll be open 8 till 9, so we're accounting for the late night shoppers who might be out. If you aren't able to get there during the week, Saturday there'll be 10 polling places across Rockingham. They'll be on our website. They're most of the usual schools that you would have voted in at previous elections, plus our early voting centre is turning into a polling place on polling day as well. So 10 sites across
plenty of opportunities.
Rockingham, plenty of opportunities. If you really want to do a postal vote, you've only got until tonight to apply for one.
Right.
Probably my advice is, given the way that the post works these days, it's probably a bit late to be asking for a postal vote.
Might be cutting it a little fine.
I don't think we'll be able to get you one out and you get it back to us in time. So
but still plenty of opportunities.
Probably the easiest thing is get down to a polling place if you're particularly if you're not able-bodied. There are ways that we can assist you. If you can get to the polling place in a car or something, we can have people come out to the car and assist you, and that sort of thing. And we have facilities within the polling places for people who might be sight impaired or who have issues with literacy and that sort of thing. So,
excellent. You'd like to accommodate.
Absolutely. We want, as I say, everyone to get out and have their say. So we will do what we can to help people cast their vote.
Beautiful.
Thanks again for your time.
Not a problem. Thanks again, Robert. That is it for now. You've been listening to the West Australian Electoral Commission, the Commissioner himself, Robert Kennedy, here on IPL Radio. But we are out of here for now.